This is a demonstration on how to do sgraffito on your pottery. So to start, you're going to need a piece of clay and you're going to need to slip it. So I have decorative slip in the room. This is a white clay that has been crushed into a powder and then made into a more fluid substance just with water. When you apply the slip, you want to do at least 3 light coats so that it bonds to the clay. So normally I'll put 1 coat. So if I'm doing it first up and down, I'll let that dry. I'll possibly take this to the hair dryer or let it air dry for a bit. Once it's not shiny anymore, I know it's dry, and then I'll apply the second coat. And I usually put the second coat going the opposite way I started. So I started up and down, now I'm going to go left to right. Once again, I'll let that dry, and then I'll take my time letting that dry, either using the hair dryer or air dry. And then I'll apply a 3rd coat, either going the opposite way I went, or I can go on a diagonal. And this just ensures I have 3 even coats. You'll see a little bit of streaks in here because I didn't let them dry in between the coats, but if you let them dry, it'll work a lot better. Once you have your piece slipped, you do want that final coat to be fully dry so that you can put your template on there. You also want the clay to be leather hard to be able to scratch. So you can see when I pick this up, it still has a little bit of flex to it, so it's still a little wet. My leather hard piece does not have any flex. It stays pretty stiff when I pick it up. So this piece is ready to be scratched. So I have my 3 to 4 layers going opposite directions. It's dry. I can put paper on it. It doesn't stick to it. You made a template in class, or you can make one now. I just used a piece of graph paper or any kind of paper. You can trace a design on here, freehand, draw, whatever you like. You're going to put this template on top of your square. Try to make sure it's centered or put it where you would like it. I like to use this method where I poke holes. This is called cartooning. You poke small holes around the shape that you want to carve or carve away. So the more holes you put, the easier it'll be to follow a line. It's a little tedious, but if you do a good job with this part, it's going to make the sgraffito a lot easier. Some people also trace along, but I find I don't see my line after when I do that. I am more successful with this cartooning method. So I go around and I poke all those holes, and I'm going to go a little quicker so you don't have to stare at me doing this for too long. If you haven't fast forwarded already. You can take your time with this. Like I said, if you do a great job with this step, it'll make your next step easier. So try not to move the paper around, just like you would if you were tracing something. You want to keep it in the, still. So now I can take this away. I might want to use this to look at, so it'll help me with this. But I'm left with an outline of what I want to carve. Now I have to decide what I want to leave white and what I want to leave dark. So if I'm going to leave the letters white, I need to carve away from the letters, or I could leave the background white and make the letters dark by carving out the letters. I'm going to leave the background white and carve the letters away. So now I can go to those dots and I can slowly and carefully scratch away the layer of slip. I'm using a carving tool. Some people prefer to use a needle tool the whole time. You can do that. I prefer to use a carving tool. If you find that it's a little difficult to do, like the slip is too wet, you can take it back to the hair dryer and dry it off a little. It does work easier when the clay is a little drier. Try not to take those little crumblies that come off and brush them against the tile. It will create some red streaks from the terracotta underneath. Also, be aware of the marks you're making. The texture does show after, so I like to try to, if I'm doing like a letter, I try to make it all go in the same direction. If I'm doing something more circular, maybe I'll carve away in a circular type motion to make those carving marks look appropriate for the image. And you can see I'm just taking those little flecks of clay and just tossing them aside. Please don't let this fall on the floor. The little crumbles can go right in the garbage. We don't need to recycle those because they have white and red clay mixed together. If you find you're having trouble with the little crumblies, you can use a dry paintbrush. Make sure it's very dry. If it's wet, it'll pick the slip back up. And you can brush the crumbs away with a paintbrush. The process goes pretty quickly, but you can take your time, especially if your design is more intricate. Your goal here is to try to get the slip away from those areas, and you don't want to see those dots either. The dots you poked, you want to make sure you carve right up to that line. And I'm not really carving that deep into the clay. I'm really just taking that top layer of white away. Some people, when they do Sgraffito art, they like to leave some of the white showing. So if that's your preference, it will create more of like a crosshatch, like a pen sketch line. You can do that, or you can choose to take the slip out completely and leave it very high contrast. It's up to you. So you want to just go around and get all those pieces out. Take your time. You do have a lot of time to do this today. Be mindful of your lines. Try not to poke any of those. Try to get all those poked dots away. You want to just see the shape you're creating. This is your time to practice. So if you did something really simple, maybe challenge yourself and put a designer on the edges. Really figure out what this Sgraffito does. How hard you press, how light can you press, can you get different line weights. If I press lightly, I can get really thin lines. If I press a little harder, I'll get thicker lines. So practice with texture, practice with line, see what you can come up with.